My family disowned me 2 years ago, convinced by my sister that I had embezzled her business funds. I vanished, quietly built a fortune, and bought a home. Now they want a reunion. I agreed, but only because I finally have the bank records they think were destroyed. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what reserves were non-existent. I was staying at my parents' house, the house I had grown up in, because my doctor had advised against me being alone while my fever was this high. I had never seen before. Behind him stood my mother, Joyce, clutching a handkerchief to her mouth, her eyes wide with a performance of horror that felt oddly rehearsed. And peeking out from behind them both, looking like a wounded gazelle, was my younger sister, Mia. "Dad," I rasped, my voice barely a whisper. I tried to sit up, but the room spun. "What's wrong?" "Don't you dad me," Robert boomed. His voice shook the walls. "Don't you dare speak to me with that innocent tone after what you've done." I blinked, the fever making it hard to process his words. I don't understand. I've been in bed." "We know what you did to Mia," Joyce sobbed, stepping forward but refusing to look me in the eye. She looked at the floor, shaking her head. "I knew you were jealous, Megan. I always knew you struggled with Mia's sparkle, but I never thought you would be criminal." "Criminal?" I coughed, the spasm racking my chest. "What are you talking about?" Mia said, her voice wavering with a fragility that I knew, even in my sickness, was a weapon. "They pulled out because the audit showed the missing $40,000. The money meant for the venue deposit. It's gone." "Okay," I said, confused. "I'm sorry, Mia, that sounds terrible, but why are you yelling at me?" "Because the transfer logs were linked to your IP address," Robert shouted, throwing a manila envelope onto the bed. It slid against my leg. "Don't lie to us. Mia's tech guy found the trail. You hacked her accounts. You stole her startup capital just to humiliate her before the launch." I stared at the envelope. I was a forensic accountant. I spent my days tracking hidden assets for divorce lawyers and corporate fraud investigations. The idea that I would steal $40,000 from my sister's boutique candle business and be stupid enough to leave an IP trail was so ludicrous it was almost funny. "Dad, that's impossible," I said, finding a scrap of strength to push myself up. "I haven't touched a computer in 10 days. I've been sleeping 18 hours a day. And even if I did, why would I steal Mia's?" His voice was cold, final. "What?" "Get out of my house," Robert repeated. "I will not harbor a thief." "Fine," I said, my voice breaking. "I'll go, but you're making a mistake." "The only mistake," Robert said, "was trusting you." That sentence, spoken with such venom by my own father, severed something inside me. It hurt more than the illness. It hurt more than the betrayal. It was the moment I realized that in their narrative, I was already the villain. They didn't want the truth. They wanted to protect Mia. I packed my bag with trembling hands, my vision blurring. As I walked out the front door into the cold drizzle, leaving my key on the table, I didn't look back. But as the door clicked shut, sealing me out of the family, I felt a strange sensation beneath the heartbreak. It was the cold, hard clarity of a ledger finally balancing. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself, but it gave me something the medicine couldn't, a reason to survive. The first 3 months were a blur of survival. I drove to a motel 6 miles privacy. The comments were a cesspool of sympathy for her and vitriol directed at the unnamed family member. Cousins I hadn't seen in years commented with angry emojis. My aunt posted, "We always knew she was dark inside, honey." I stopped going out. I converted my sadness into billable hours. When you are alone in the world, money stops being a luxury and starts being a fortress. I needed walls, and I needed them to be made of financial independence. 6 months in, I got a promotion. 1 year in, I started my own consultancy firm. 18 months in, I bought a house. Estate on the edge of town, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a garden that required a landscaper. It was the kind of house Joyce would have killed to brag about at her bridge club. But they didn't know. To them, I was likely still the struggling, jealous sister living in a family reunion engagement party at the country club next month. We believe in forgiveness. We want you to come. We are willing to pay for your ticket and your hotel. We assume you cannot afford the travel. We also think it would be healing if you gave a short speech, just to clear the air, to admit your mistakes and ask for the family's blessing again. It's time to put this behind us. Don't be stubborn, come home. Dad. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that echoed off the high ceilings. They weren't inviting me because they missed me. They were inviting me because a grand family reunion looks bad if one daughter is missing. It raises questions. They needed a prop. They needed the prodigal daughter to return, head bowed, admitting she was the villain so that Mia could shine even brighter as the benevolent saint who forgave her. They wanted me. To clear the air. I walked over to my home office. It was a state-of-the-art setup, with 3 monitors and a secure server rack in the corner. I sat down and woke up the screens. I opened a folder I had named Project Gaslight. Inside were 2 years of data, not just my data, theirs. See, they had forgotten one crucial thing about kicking a forensic accountant out of the family. I had set up their entire digital life. I had configured Robert's Wi-Fi, I had set up Joyce's cloud backups, and I had synced Mia's business accounts to the family server years ago to help her with taxes. When they kicked me out, they took my key, but they never changed their passwords. I clicked on a subfolder titled Mia's Stolen Funds. I looked at the PDF I had compiled months ago, just for my own peace of mind. It wasn't a hack. It was simply data that had been automatically backed up to a shared drive they asked me to manage 5 years ago and never revoked access to. I read the letter again. We assume you cannot afford the travel. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the country club where they were holding the event. Reservations, a cheerful voice answered. Hi, I said, my voice smooth and steady. I'm calling regarding the Miller reunion next month. I'll be attending, and I'd like to confirm that the venue has audio-visual capabilities. I've been asked to give a speech, and I have a presentation. Yes, ma'am, we have a full projector and screen setup. Perfect, I said. I'll see you then. I wasn't going there to apologize. I was going there to give them exactly what they asked for. I was going to clear the air. To understand why I agreed to walk back into the lion's den, you have to understand Mia. Mia was 3 years younger than me, and from the moment she was born, she was the protagonist of the family. She was louder, brighter, and needier. When we were kids, if I got an A on a report card, the dinner conversation would inevitably shift to how creative Mia's C+ drawing was. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me. It was just that loving Mia was a full-time job. She was a chaotic force of nature. She consumed attention like oxygen. By the time we were in our 20s, the dynamic was set in stone. I was the reliable one, the boring one. I was the one who fixed the printer, did the taxes, and drove them to the airport. Mia was the free spirit. She dropped out of 3 different colleges. She started a jewelry line that failed, a dog-walking service that ended when she lost a client's poodle for 6 hours, and finally, Luminescence, the candle business. Joyce and Robert enabled her every step of the way. They bailoed her out of credit card debt twice. They paid her rent just for a few months that turned into 4 years. They were terrified of her temper. If Mia didn't get her way, she would spiral, crying, screaming, threatening to cut them off. It was emotional terrorism, and they negotiated with the terrorist every single time. I was the only one who ever told her no. 6 months before the theft, Mia had come to me asking for a loan. She needed $10,000. She said it was for inventory, but I knew she had just come back from a trip to Cholum that she definitely couldn't afford. I can't lend you money, Mia, I had told her. You haven't paid back the last $2,000. You need a business plan, not a handout. She had looked at me with eyes cold as ice. You think you're better than me because you have a 401k, Megan? You're just a miser. You want me to fail. That was the seed. I realized later that was the moment she decided I was an enemy. Now, as I prepared for the reunion, I did my due diligence on the current situation. I used my resources to look into Lumina Sense again. It turned out the business had relaunched 6 months ago. Mia was all over Instagram, posing with her fiancé, Mark. Mark was a nice enough guy, a soft-spoken architect who seemed perpetually dazed by Mia's intensity. He came from money, old money. That was Mia's real career goal, marrying well. I dug deeper into the public records. Robert and Joyce had taken out a second mortgage on their house 6 months ago. The timeline aligned perfectly with Mia's relaunch and the deposit for this massive reunion at the country club. They were bleeding themselves dry to keep up the facade of the perfect family, bankrolling Mia's lifestyle and this extravagant party to show the world that the Millers were thriving. And then there was the antagonist herself, Mia. I found a recent video she had posted. She was sitting in her car, the ring light reflecting in her eyes. "So excited for the family reunion," she chirped, talking to her followers. "It's been such a hard road. We've had to cut out toxic elements to get to this place of peace. But sometimes you have to protect your energy, you know? Can't wait to share the big day with you all." Toxic elements. She was building a brand. On her victimhood, she was selling candles named Resilience and Forgiveness. I leaned back in my chair, watching the video loop. She looked polished. She looked convincing. She looked like the golden child who had overcome the criminal actions of her jealous sister. But as I watched, I noticed something else. A new car in the background of her video, a luxury SUV. I paused the video and zoomed in. I ran the plate. Leased in Robert's name. She wasn't just lying about the past. She was actively cannibalizing our parents' retirement, and they were thanking her for it. The phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local to my parents. I picked it up. "Hello. Is this Megan?" The voice was hushed, nervous. It took me a second to place it. It was Aunt Carol, Joyce's sister, the one who had commented that I was dark inside. "Hello, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice neutral. "Oh, thank goodness. Your mother gave me your number. Listen, dear," she lowered her voice even further. "I just wanted to give you a heads up about the reunion." "A heads up?" "Yes, Mia, well, she's bringing a special guest. A lawyer. She's been telling people that if you don't apologize publicly, she's going to have him serve you with a lawsuit for the stolen money right there at the dinner. To put the matter to rest." I felt a cold smile touch my lips. "She's planning to sue me, at the party." "She says it's the only way to get closure," Aunt Carol whispered. "I just thought you should know. Maybe just write a check, Megan. Even if you didn't do it just to keep the peace. Your father is so stressed." "Thank you for telling me, Aunt Carol," I said genuinely. "That is very useful information." "So you'll pay." "I'll see you at the reunion," I said and hung up. They weren't just luring me there to be a prop. They were luring me there to be a piñata. Mia wanted to beat the money out of me publicly, cementing her victory. She wanted a show. I looked at the printer as it whirred to life, spitting out the final page of a bank statement from the Cayman Islands. "Okay, Mia," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's give them a show." The week before the reunion wasn't spent shopping for a dress or writing a groveling apology. It was spent in what I called the war room. My dining room table had disappeared beneath a sea of color-coded binders, printed bank statements, and timelines taped to the massive sliding glass doors that overlooked my garden. I treated this not as a family dispute, but as a high-stakes corporate audit. In my line of work, emotion is a liability. Data is the only currency that matters. I needed to do more than just prove I didn't take the $40,000. That was defense. I needed to go on the offense. I needed to dismantle the entire narrative Mia had constructed over the last 2 years. I started with the smoking gun from that terrible night, the IP address. Robert had claimed the transfer was linked to my IP. At the time, I was too sick to argue. But now, sitting with a cup of black coffee and 3 monitors humming, I dug into the server logs from 2 years ago. It took me less than 20 minutes to find the anomaly. The transfer had been initiated from a device on the family Wi-Fi network. But the MAC address, the unique digital fingerprint of the device, didn't match my laptop. It didn't match my phone. It matched a device labeled Mia's iPad Pro. But she had been clever, or at least she thought she had. She had used a VPN, a virtual private network, to mask the location, routing the signal through a server that, coincidentally, was hosted by the same ISP I used at my apartment. To a layman like my father, who looked at a simple summary log provided by Mia's tech guy, it looked like the traffic came from my house. "Sloppy, Mia," I muttered, highlighting the line on the spreadsheet. "Lazy and sloppy." But I didn't stop there. I followed the money. The $40,000 had gone into a holding account under a shell company name, Lux Consulting LLC. It sounded legitimate, but a quick search of the state business registry showed the LLC was dissolved 3 months after it was formed. The registered agent? A P.O. box in a town 2 hours away. I hired a private investigator, a retired cop named Henderson, whom I used for difficult divorce cases, to physically check the P.O. box owner. He called me back 2 days later. "You're not going to believe this, Megan," Henderson's gravelly voice crackled over the speakerphone. "The P.O. box is registered to a Mark Davison." I froze. Mark, her fiancé. "No," Henderson said. "Not the fiancé. I ran a background check. This Mark Davison is a 24-year-old personal trainer in the city. Looks like an ex-boyfriend, or a current one." My stomach turned. Mia wasn't just stealing to cover business losses. She was stealing to fund a lifestyle or a person that her perfect fiancé knew nothing about. I kept digging. I pulled the credit reports for my parents. It was a bloodbath. They had co-signed 3 loans for Mia in the last year alone. Their retirement savings were down 40%. The second mortgage I had suspected was real, and it was an adjustable-rate nightmare that was about to balloon. Then I found the piece de resistance. I was cross-referencing Mia's social media posts with her bank withdrawals, which I could see because she was still using the joint account with Mom for business expenses. Post date August 12th. Mia poses with a limited edition designer handbag. Caption, "Hubby-to-be spoiled me, blessed." Bank transaction August 11th. Withdrawal of $4,500 from Robert and Joyce joint checking. Memo, venue deposit. She was cannibalizing our parents' future to buy props for her Instagram life, all while crediting Mark for the gifts to keep him happy and blaming me for the losses to keep our parents angry. It was a perfect triangle of manipulation. I printed the side-by-side comparison, the photo of the bag and the bank statement showing the withdrawal. I put it in the binder. By Friday night, I had a 60-slide presentation. It detailed the IP spoofing, the money trail, the fake LLC, the secret boyfriend's payoffs, and the systematic draining of our parents' accounts. I saved it to a USB drive, then I saved it to the cloud, then I emailed it to myself. I looked at the sleek black dress hanging on the door of my office. It was sharp, professional, and expensive, armor for the modern woman. "Clear the air," I whispered, repeating my father's request. The air was going to be so clear, it would burn their lungs. The country club was exactly as I remembered it, smelling of old money, furniture polish, and desperation. I pulled up to the valet stand in my car. It wasn't a Ferrari, but it was a brand new, top-of-the-line luxury sedan, sleek silver and impeccably clean. The valet, a young kid who looked bored, straightened up when he saw it. "Nice ride," he noted as he handed me the ticket. "Keep it close," I said, handing him a 20. "I won't be staying late." I walked up the grand staircase. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but my face was a mask of bored indifference. I had practiced this expression in the mirror for 2 hours. The grand reunion was in the Oak Room. I could hear the chatter before I even reached the double doors. Crystal glasses clinking, polite laughter, the hum of gossip. I pushed the doors open. The room went silent. It wasn't a gradual quiet, it was instant. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. I stood in the doorway, framed by the light from the hall. I wasn't the sick, shivering girl in sweatpants they remembered. I was wearing a tailored black jumpsuit with a structured blazer, my hair cut in a sharp, chic bob, wearing heels that clicked with authority on the hardwood floor. My mother, Joyce, was the first to move. She rushed over, her face a mixture of confusion and irritation. She was wearing a pastel dress that looked too young for her, and I noticed immediately how tired she looked. The lines around her eyes were deep. "Megan," she hissed, stopping a foot away from me. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on the designer bag on my shoulder. "You're late. And what is this? Did you rent a car? We told you we would cover an Uber." "Hello, Mother," I said calmly. "I drove myself, I'm doing well." "Well, you certainly put on a show," she muttered, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward a corner, away from the guests. "Listen, we need to go over the schedule. Dinner is at 7. Speeches are at 7:30. Your father and I have written out a few bullet points for you." She shoved a folded index card into my hand. I looked down at it. 1. Express gratitude to Mia for forgiving me. 2. Admit that jealousy clouded my judgment 2 years ago. 3. Promise to repay the family slowly over time. 4. Ask for a fresh start. It was a confession to a crime I didn't commit. "I'm not reading this," I said, looking up. "You have to," Joyce whispered, her voice trembling with that familiar anxiety. "Mia is on edge. Her lawyer friend is here. If you don't say the right things, she's going to cause a scene, Megan. Do you want to ruin her engagement party too? Haven't you done enough?" I prepared my own speech, I said, tucking the card into my pocket. "Don't worry, it addresses everything." Before she could argue, a voice cut through the air. "Well, look who decided to show up." I turned. Mia was standing there holding a glass of champagne. She looked stunning, I had to admit. White dress, perfect tan, diamonds glittering at her throat, but her eyes were hard. Mark stood beside her, looking uncomfortable. He gave me a small, awkward wave. "Hi, Mia," I said. "Hi, Mark." "I'm surprised you came," Mia said, stepping into my personal space. She smelled of expensive perfume and wine. "I thought you'd be too ashamed." "Dad invited me," I said. "He said you wanted to clear the air." "I want my money," Mia said, her voice dropping to a whisper so Mark wouldn't hear. "And I want you to admit what you are in front of everyone. If you try to spin some story, I swear to God, Megan, I will bury you. My lawyer has the paperwork ready to garnish your wages, assuming you have wages." I looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the makeup, I saw the fear. She was vibrating with it. She needed me to confess because if I didn't, the holes in her story would start to show. "I'm sure Mark is very interested in the finances," I said, shifting my gaze to him. "Mark, how is the investment portfolio doing? The one Mia manages." Mia stiffened. "Don't talk to him." "It's okay," Mark said, confused. "We've had some setbacks. The wedding costs are high." "Setbacks," I repeated, "like the venue deposit." Mia's eyes went wide. "Shut up, Megan." "I'm just making conversation," I said, smiling thinly. "I'll see you at the podium, Mia." I walked away, leaving them standing there. I could feel Mia's eyes boring into my back. I walked straight to the AV technician at the back of the room. "Hi," I said, handing him my USB drive. "I'm the 7:30 speaker. This is the presentation. Do not, under any circumstances, play it until I give the signal, and once it starts, do not stop it." The tech, a bored teenager in a polo shirt, shrugged. "Whatever you say, lady." The trap was set. The hour between my arrival and dinner was a masterclass in social isolation. My relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins I used to babysit, treated me like I was radioactive. I would approach a group, and they would suddenly find the ceiling architecture fascinating or remember they needed a fresh drink. I heard snippets of conversation as I passed. Can't believe she showed her face. Prison, I heard. Poor Joyce having to deal with her. It hurt, I won't lie and say I was immune to it. These were people whose birthdays I had remembered, whose secrets I had kept. But their rejection hardened my resolve. They didn't hate me, they hated the caricature Mia had drawn of me, and they were about to find out that the artist was a fraud. I found myself cornered near the bar by Aunt Carol and a man in a cheap, ill-fitting suit. This had to be the lawyer. "Megan," Aunt Carol said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "This is Mr. Henderson. He's representing Mia." "Henderson?" I asked. "No relation to the private investigator, I assume." The lawyer blinked, confused. No, I'm a family friend." "Listen, Ms. Miller, we have a draft of a settlement agreement here. If you sign it tonight, acknowledging the debt of $40,000 plus interest, Mia is willing to waive the punitive damages lawsuit." He held out a clipboard. I looked at the document. It was garbage. Legally unenforceable, poorly drafted, probably downloaded from a template site. "You're not a litigation attorney, are you?" I asked, looking him in the eye. "You do real estate closings. Maybe traffic court." He flushed red. "My practice area is irrelevant. The evidence against you is overwhelming." "Is it?" I took a sip of my sparkling water. "Does the evidence include the bank transfer logs from Lux Consulting LLC?" The lawyer's face went blank. He didn't know what that was. Mia hadn't told him everything. But Aunt Carol gasped, "What are you talking about?" "Ask Mia," I said. "Ask her why the stolen money ended up in an account that paid for Mark's birthday trip to Cabo last year. You were on that trip, weren't you, Aunt Carol? Did you enjoy the villa? My $40,000 paid for it." Aunt Carol turned pale. Mia said she won a contest." "Mia says a lot of things," I said. "Excuse me, I need to find my seat." I walked away, my heart pounding. I had just fired the first warning shot. I took my seat at the main family table. It was a torture device disguised as a dining arrangement. I was seated at the far end, next to a cousin who refused to look at me. Mia, Mark, and my parents were at the center. Dinner was served, rubbery chicken and roasted potatoes. I didn't eat, I watched. I watched Mia down 3 glasses of wine in rapid succession. She was whispering frantically to Mark, who looked increasingly agitated. She kept shooting glances at me, angry, fearful glances. She knew I knew something, but she didn't know how much I knew. Then the moment of truth arrived. My father, Robert, stood up and tapped his spoon against his glass. The room quieted. "Thank you all for coming," he boomed, putting on his paternal patriarch voice. "Tonight is about family, it's about love, and it's about forgiveness. We are so proud of Mia and Mark, and we are grateful that our daughter Megan has joined us to make our circle complete again." He looked at me, his eyes were cold. "Megan, why don't you come up here and say a few words?" It was a command, not a request. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was crystal clear. I picked up the remote control the AV tech had left on the table for me. As I walked to the podium, Mia leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Stick to the script, Megan," she mouthed. I reached the microphone. The room was silent. I looked out at the sea of faces, my parents, my relatives, the people who had judged me without a trial. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice steady, amplified by the speakers. "You asked me to come here tonight to clear the air, to explain why I've been silent for 2 years, and to finally address the stolen money that tore this family apart." I paused. I saw Joyce nod encouragingly, thinking I was about to apologize. "For 2 years," I continued, "I have been the villain of this story, but I am a forensic accountant. I don't deal in stories, I deal in facts." I raised the remote. "And I think it's time you all saw the receipts." I clicked the button. The massive projection screen behind me dropped down, and the lights in the room dimmed. The first slide appeared in high definition. It wasn't an apology. It was a bank statement titled, the unauthorized withdrawals. A collective gasp went through the room. Mia dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot. "What is she doing?" Joyce shrieked. "Turn it off," Mia screamed, standing up, her face twisted in panic. "Turn it off right now." "I'm just getting started," I said into the microphone, my voice calm and dangerous. "Sit down, Mia. We have a lot of math to get through." "Turn it off," Mia shrieked again, lunging toward the AV table. But I had anticipated this. I had hired a security guard, a large, silent man named Paul, who stepped quietly into her path. She bounced off his chest like a bird hitting a window pane. "Please remain seated," I said, my voice cool and professional, echoing through the stunned silence of the Oak Room. "We are reviewing the fiscal year of betrayal." I clicked the remote. Slide 2 appeared. It was a complex diagram, but I had color-coded it for the layperson. On the left was the transfer log from the night I was kicked out. On the right was a technical breakdown of the IP address. 2 years ago, my father kicked me out because a transfer of $40,000 was initiated from my IP address, I explained, walking around the podium so I could look my father in the eye. He was told by Mia's tech guy that this was irrefutable proof, but he was lied to. I pointed the laser pointer at the screen. "This is a packet capture log. It shows that while the IP address mimicked my location, the device's MAC address, the hardware fingerprint, did not match my laptop. It matched a device named Mia's iPad Pro." The room murmured. I saw my father, Robert, squinting at the screen. His mouth opened slightly. "But that's not the interesting part," I continued, pressing the button. "Slide 3, the shell company. The money went to a vendor called Lux Consulting LLC," I said. Mia told the family this was a marketing firm. She claimed they took the money and ran. But here is the Secretary of State filing for Lux Consulting. I zoomed in on the signature line. The registered agent is a man named Jason Miller. "Who is Jason Miller?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. She looked from me to Mia. "We don't know a Jason Miller." "No," I said, "but Mia does. Jason is a personal trainer at the gym Mia joined 3 months before the theft, and according to these Venmo transactions between them." I clicked again. A long list of payments appeared on the screen, accompanied by heart emojis and captions like "Thanks for the workout" and "Secret Weekend Fund." "He is also her lover." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. All eyes turned to Mark, the fiancé. Mark was standing perfectly still. His face had drained of all color, leaving him looking like a wax statue. He looked at the screen, then at Mia. "Mia," he whispered, you said you barely knew the trainers there." "He's lying," Mia screamed, pointing at me. "She forged it. Megan is a hacker. She made it all up to ruin my wedding." "Did I forge this too?" I asked. Slide 4, the lifestyle audit. This was the slide that destroyed her. It was a split screen. On one side were Mia's Instagram posts from the last 2 years. On the other were the corresponding bank transactions from the Robert and Joyce Miller joint account and the Lumina Sense business account. "Exhibit A," I narrated, my voice monotone. "Instagram post from last July. Caption: Mark surprised me with a trip to Napa. Best fiancé ever." Actual funding source: a $3,000 withdrawal from mom and dad's retirement savings, labeled emergency medical bill. My mother let out a sound like a wounded animal. She brought her hands to her mouth. "Medical bill? You told me you needed an MRI." "Exhibit B," I continued, relentless. "The Cartier bracelet on her wrist right now. Caption: a gift from my investors." Actual funding source: the vendor deposit refund from the first failed wedding venue. She never lost the deposit, Mark. She cashed the check and spent it. Mark stepped back from Mia as if she were contagious. "And finally," I said, clicking to the last slide, "the reason we are all here tonight, the grand reunion." The screen showed a document titled HELOC Agreement. "Mom, Dad," I said, looking at my parents. They were huddled together, looking smaller than I had ever seen them. You think you paid for this party with your savings? You didn't. You didn't have any savings left. Mia spent them 6 months ago covering her credit card debt. No, Robert croaked. No, we checked the balance. You checked the screenshots Mia sent you, I corrected. She photoshopped them. This document shows that she forged your signatures to take out a second mortgage on the house. You don't own your home anymore. The bank owns 80% of it, and the first payment is due next week. It's $4,000. You don't have it. Robert slumped into his chair. He looked like he was having a stroke. The room was spinning with whispers, gasps, and the sound of silverware clinking as people shifted uncomfortably. Mia looked around the room. She saw the disgust in our relatives' eyes. She saw the horror on our parents' faces. She saw Mark taking off his engagement ring and placing it on the table with a quiet clink. Mark, she pleaded, reaching for him. Baby, please, it's a setup. She's jealous. She's always been jealous. Mark looked at her with a look of profound pity. You stole from your parents, he said, his voice shaking. You stole from me, you cheated on me with your trainer, and you let your sister take the fall for all of it. I did it for us, Mia screamed, her mask finally slipping completely, revealing the ugly, snarling entitlement underneath. I did it so we could have the life we deserved. Megan doesn't need the money. She's a boring, miserable spinster. She has nothing. I needed it. I have a house, I said calmly from the podium. I have a clean conscience, and I have the receipts. Mia let out a guttural scream of rage. She grabbed a wine bottle from the table and hurled it at me. It missed by 10 feet, smashing against the projection screen, dripping red wine down the image of her forged bank statements like blood. I hate you, she screamed. I hate all of you. She spun around and ran. She bolted toward the double doors, her heels clacking frantically on the floor. She pushed them open and disappeared into the night, leaving the grand reunion in ruins. I stood at the podium, the hum of the projector fan the only sound in the room. I believe, I said, turning off the remote, that the air is now clear. The aftermath of the explosion was a slow, painful burn. The party dissolved within minutes. The guests, aunts who had snubbed me, cousins who had mocked me, filed out in awkward silence. None of them could look me in the eye. They grabbed their coats and fled the scene of the crime, desperate to distance themselves from the disaster. Mark left without a word. He walked past me on his way out, paused for a second, and just nodded. It was a nod of respect and of shared trauma. He looked 10 years older than he had when he walked in. Eventually, it was just me, the cleaning staff, and my parents. They were still sitting at the head table, surrounded by empty chairs and half-eaten plates of rubbery chicken. My mother was weeping softly, her face buried in her hands. My father was staring at the tablecloth, his posture broken. I packed up my laptop. I coiled the cords. I put the USB drive back in my pocket. I walked over to them. Megan, my mother sobbed when she saw me approaching. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling. Megan, oh God, we didn't know. We trusted her. I know you did, I said. I didn't take her hand. She's ruined us, Robert whispered. He looked up at me, his eyes red and watery. The house, the savings, it's all gone. Megan, she took everything. She took it because you gave her the keys, I said gently but firmly. You enabled her for 30 years. You protected her from every consequence. This is just the bill coming due. We need to fix this, Robert said, a glimmer of his old commanding tone trying to surface but failing. We need to call the police. We need to, Megan, you're an accountant. You can help us. You can track the money. Maybe we can get it back. He looked at me with hope. He expected me to jump in. He expected me to be the good daughter, the fixer, the one who cleaned up the mess while Mia ran away. That had been my role for my entire life. I can't help you, Dad, I said. He blinked. What, but you're family. I was family when I had pneumonia and you kicked me out into the rain, I said. I was family when you accused me of being a thief without a shred of proof. I was family when you let me live in a motel for a week and never called to see if I was alive. We were angry, Joyce cried. We were manipulated. Yes, I said, but you chose who to believe. And you chose the liar because she was the one you liked more. That has a cost. I reached into my purse and pulled out a business card for a bankruptcy attorney I knew. I placed it on the table next to the wine stain. This is a good lawyer. He can help you navigate the foreclosure and the fraud charges you'll need to file against Mia if you want to discharge the debt. But I won't be doing it. Where are you going? Robert asked, panic rising in his voice. You can't just leave us here. I'm going home, I said. To the house I bought, to the life I built. I have a meeting in the morning. Megan, please, my mother begged. Don't be like this. We're your parents. And I'm your daughter, I said. But tonight I'm just the auditor, and the audit is closed. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked out of the country club, past the valet who looked at me with wide eyes, news travels fast, and got into my car. As I drove home, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. But beneath the tiredness, there was something else. Peace. It wasn't a happy ending in the traditional sense. My family was shattered. My sister was likely facing prison time. I later heard Mark pressed charges for the theft, and the parents had to file a report to save themselves from bankruptcy. Mia's reputation was destroyed, not by me, but by the truth. I pulled into my driveway. The motion sensor lights flickered on, illuminating my modern, glass-fronted house. I walked inside, kicked off my heels, and poured myself a glass of wine, not the cheap stuff they served at the reunion, but a vintage red I had been saving. I walked out to my patio and sat in the silence of my garden. I had spent 2 years wondering if I was the villain. I had spent 2 years replaying that night, wondering if I was unlovable, if I was broken. Tonight, I had my answer. I wasn't the villain, I wasn't the victim. I was just the one who kept the receipts. And as I took a sip of wine, looking up at the clear, star-filled sky, I finally let go. I deleted the Project Gaslight folder from my cloud. The air was finally clear.